Good morning and welcome to the weekly review on this Sunday. Hopefully you've had a lovely half term if you're in that neck of the world and you're enjoying your last Sunday before going back to work. We've got three really interesting stories this week. This one has been around, but we didn't have one last weekend because of the bank holiday. So we're talking about what is national service and how would it work. So Rishi Sunak has announced a mandatory scheme for students to do a year of national service, or there's some kind of little caveat that they could volunteer instead. What's your opinion on this, John? What do you make of it?
Well, as you say, it's a story that's been around a little while, and people have already said the things that your first reaction might be. It's an election gimmick. Okay, it's been snatched out of the air. This is one of those few elections where the government have caught themselves by surprise, and now they've caught themselves by surprise by this policy. It's just, where's it come from? That it's not militarily very good. Most military people don't think that conscripts are much use in the real world of modern day warfare and so on. So then when I think about it, well, why is it then? Where's it coming from? And I think it's coming from a sort of desire to do, a sort of prejudice of young people, a fear that there's out there somewhere a lot of feckless youths who need to be put to work. So which is why I think people's first reaction is somehow it sentimentally sounds quite good. If it did come about, and it absolutely won't, it will fall apart during the election as they pull it apart. The government, if they won the election, it would not actually come about. It would go the same way as David Cameron's community service thing that just faded. If it did come about, though, I guarantee there'd be very different sort of experience from working class people to middle class people. And any volunteering that took place would be very different. Some people would be in art galleries, some people were working for charities, other people would be painting the local toilets on the recreation ground. That is the way it would actually unfold in the future.
It's also one of those that we're currently struggling with getting students to attend school, with attendance figures being really low. How do you feel we're going to be able to get people to actually attend national service or actually attend volunteering, Nathan? Do you think that actually there is the scope to be able to get children involved in this? And how are they going to be able to persuade kids to do it? Or is there going to be consequences to this?
Yeah, I think, linked into some of what John's saying is I think there is going to be a kind of social aspect to this where, the people that are hard to reach and hard to engage. And something like this is going to maybe benefit some people in the middle, maybe, but who is it there to reach? Because if it's there to reach the children who aren't engaging with school, if it's there to, pull them up by their bootstraps or whatever the latest line is, about giving them some discipline in the military, whatever it is we're talking about, we can't get them into school at the moment. So how are we going to get them into the army when they definitely don't want to do that? And then the bit for me about it is electioneering, kind of promises and all of these things, and inventing something new to announce, because there's so many things that we could be doing. There are people from a military background who work with young people to engage them in the cadets, in other schemes. And there are volunteering schemes like the Duke of Edinburgh that schools are struggling to staff, struggling to fund already, that we could just be putting money into making those things better or more equal opportunities for those. So yeah, I'm not impressed, and I agree. It's going to cause so many problems that I think it's so ill thought through. It's just not going to work.
And on that point, I was trying to find the figure. It's a huge amount of money that it will take to fund, because not only are they going to have to fund people to look after these children, but also train them in order to be able to look after the children. And also it's also, if they are volunteering, it's all the funding and everything that's going to have to be safeguarded around those children going into those different environments and making sure they've got every place that they go into has got insurance and proper training. Like, there's such a cost to this. But like Nathan said, is there actually quite a lot that's going on, Maxine, that you think that we could potentially use and fund that money elsewhere to have a better impact? Or do you think actually maybe this is a good idea and it's something worth fueling money into?
Okay. So there are bones of it underneath that are potentially good ideas. Giving youngsters the opportunity to go in and volunteer and, you know, take an active role in life is really, really positive. But yeah, Nathan's called it out perfectly. Duke of Edinburgh schemes are fantastic, give really good opportunities for that. But they need better funding. You know, we've seen lots and lots of similar opportunities fall by the wayside, where schools and, you know, other youth organisations have really struggled due to a lack of funding. So yes, there are other things. You know, it talks about, in the article, it talks about volunteering to help the fire, police and NHS. Maybe fund the fire, police and NHS a bit better. And I'm just thinking about that sort of edge. There's two things for me. Thinking about that edge of the reluctant volunteer. Would you want to be in an NHS hospital where you've got a volunteer who really doesn't want to be there, sees no point in it, hasn't been, you know, sort of true buy into this, but is there because it's their national service? They've got to be. I think just didn't sit right for me. And again, there are those other elements as well about equality of opportunity for it. The big thing for me is that the line where it said details remain unclear. And dare I say it, does sound slightly political. How many times within the current government or potentially at, you know, this sort of times around election, do we get those? Yeah, details are unclear, but here's a big announcement. It's going to go back to the old days. And I see Brent's made a comment there as well, but it is that sort of harking back. So not terribly impressed by it myself.
I think it's exactly that. It's quite an old school kind of thought, and I did cadets at school mainly because I was captain of the swim team, and our coach also doubled up as the major who ran our cadets. So I kind of did it because he told me to, and I do whatever my coach tells me to. But I certainly learned a lot of discipline from that. And I think I remember, I think it must have been one of my very first shows, we talked about kind of results and how they're spread across the country in terms of achievement. And actually, a lot of these places that are further away, they don't have the transport, because transports have been cut, to be able to get to activities and be able to do after school clubs. And actually, we know from the research that doing an after school club or doing some extracurricular activity equates to about a G1 grade at GCSE. So actually, maybe these kind of things could happen, but they just need to be better funded within schools, as opposed to it being this headline that all kids are going to do this mandatory thing that actually just needs to be part of the curriculum and kind of thought about in a better way. But it's certainly an interesting one to see if that will come to fruition. But thank you for your thoughts on that. And now we'll move on to our next story. So our next story is talking about the fact that fewer pupils are studying drama and media at GCSE and A-level. And as an art teacher, I feel like this kind of spreads across the arts as well. It's across the same cohort. I know languages are slightly starting to recover in that, but drama is down 5.8% at A-level. And media is down 6.9%. So it is one of those that it's a shame that these kind of subjects are kind of in the decline. And I think somebody tagged, when we said we were going to talk about this, tagged Keir Starmer talking about the fact that actually the creative arts are really impressive. And I know I'm talked about this lots on my previous shows, that the Culture Learning Alliance, they have done research that shows actually if you study one of these subjects, it will increase your maths and English by 15%. It will increase your mental health because it gives you better skills in terms of kind of learning those subjects. So how do we kind of change that narrative to make it be that actually these subjects are important? Because I know when I tell my students that, they're like, are you serious, Miss? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, actually, if you take an art subject and you're from a pupil premium background, you're more likely to go to university. And they're like, I didn't realise that. And it's like, they don't realise this. So how do we change this narrative and make sure that the kids are aware, and also the parents, in terms of getting them to feel a positive feeling around things like drama and media? Maxine, what's your thoughts on this?
I agree with you totally about it being the importance of changing the narrative. And we hear just the opposite, don't we, about Mickey Mouse degrees or things that aren't worthwhile. And, you know, we hear that continually, you know, government performance measures drive the sciences. And I think that's become part of conversation with students. You know, you think about getting on the housing market these days, thinking about where the jobs are that are going to earn the money, going to get you in there quickly. So it is about, you're absolutely right, around some really strong messaging about what are the values of the arts. So first of all, yeah, so making sure that's something that we share, that we talk openly about as teachers and careers advisors and futures advisors, but also we do need some other voices talking about that outside schools. So the arts councils, and, you know, we need to look for high status figures as well who really push forward the arts from a range of diverse backgrounds, and also particularly those maybe who are in the area of arts who are from under-resourced backgrounds, just really to be driving the value of that as a power actually of something great for our nation. If we're producing artists and performers, not just your own value for you, but starting to understand that good that you're bringing in for the whole of our nation. That they're my thoughts, and I think that follows on from what you were saying about it being about that narrative.
I remember post-COVID, there was a government campaign where they released a series of posters that were trying to get people to change their careers. And there was a beautiful picture of a ballerina, and it was like Fatima could be working in cybersecurity next year. And it really got the arts up into kind of their backs up, because it was like, well, A, she might love dancing. B, she's wearing a costume that's done by a costume designer. C, your whole poster is designed by a graphic designer. So you're telling them to move out of the arts and move into other subjects, but you're using something that's created by artists. And actually, it's one of the biggest growing sectors of our country, our creative sector. So it seems weird that we would be trying to persuade people to not go into that. Now, Nathan if you don't know, is our lovely graphic designer here at Teach Talk Radio. So all of our lovely info is by Nathan. How important do you think it is that people are learning these skills and actually realize that they are life skills that will kind of, if you like, thinking about how you present your work and how you show that to somebody is really important as well?
Well, I think the sad thing is it's not a new story. You know, there is a trend towards, you know, this decline in working class access to the arts since the 50s, since the 60s. You know, I think that trend has been going on. And myself personally, I know it's lovely that you say those things about my artistry, but when I came to choose my A levels, my parents specifically told me not to choose A-level art. They wouldn't allow me to. I had to choose maths instead, because it was something that was utilitarian. It would get me a good job, you know, in the city, one of these, impressive, worthwhile jobs that I'm sure Rishi Sunak is talking about when he compares them to Mickey Mouse degrees. I faced that choice, and I did that choice. And it's now much later in life that I'm kind of circling back to find the usefulness of my art. But that is against the point for me, because for me, and this is maybe the difference in educational outlook, education isn't necessarily supposed to be useful in securing you your job. There is a benefit to education in broadening perspectives, broadening views, and this kind of thing smacks to me of a worry that, you know, art and drama and these things are the preserve of the rich and a hobby for the elite. Whereas actually we should all have access to it. And there's, you know, brilliant talks from people like Michael Sheen, the actor. I saw recently an interview with Noel Gallagher talking about where are the working class bands at the moment? Where are the rock bands coming from? Because they're not coming from working class backgrounds as far as he was concerned. And I think it is an age-old question, but definitely one we should worry about in times of economic hardship, because that's when working class people have to make tough decisions around income, and arts is one of the things that always kind of falls by the wayside, I think.
I completely agree. It's really interesting that like we talked about how actually the funding potentially is not going to go to the right people, and actually the people that don't have these opportunities to study dance or study drama or study media as extracurricular activities will never necessarily know the benefit. So it is just their outside influences, and people are telling them that these subjects aren't important. But actually, I do kind of agree with the idea that it should be included potentially. One of the arts should be in kind of your EBACs. It should be what count as one of them. It's important that everybody understands the importance of creativity. And actually, there's a hospital in London that hires an art teacher to teach their surgeons to problem solve, because there is lots of skills. It's not necessarily just about drawing. There's a lot of creativity and problem solving that is developed through doing those subjects. Same as drama, it's about presentation and oracy and talking, and that is such, we've learned through the research that is actually such a good thing, and it has a positive impact. So we need to be encouraging people to kind of do those different things. What's your opinion? Should it be, I've got a show that I proper have a rant on this on, should it be a core subject? But John, what's your opinion on, do you think the arts should be included there as a core subject as well?
Absolutely, of course. Really, absolutely endorse everything that's been said so far. The nostalgic idea of the past, somehow, that once upon a time kids learnt grammar and science and maths and things, and today they're faffing around doing arts things. Mickey Mouse degrees, as Maxine points out, the idea there, this hierarchy of knowledge that somehow the middle classes, though, as Nathan rightly points out, it's fine for the middle classes to do arts and classics and history and such like. What we're really talking about is the lumpen proletariat. What you want them is learning useful skills that can make them good economic units. All that's true. I absolutely loved drama at school. It was the highlight of my week. I delighted in drama. It was the funnest subject. And it was partly because when I remember it at school, it was playing. It was playing, but playing in that way that kids play, by putting on roles and developing characters and interacting off each other and so on. So that you get 9-year-olds who play that way, and by the time they're 13, they're sitting around in the park on the swing, smoking, wondering what to do. And drama gave you a chance in school to play and to exhibit those skills. And you absolutely rightly say, they're life skills, incredibly important life skills, the skills you can learn, develop in drama. And I'll add one thing, though. One of the more dispiriting things I experienced in my teaching career was when I was involved in assessing GCSE drama and wandering around the room trying to identify assessment objectives in students that could somehow be quantified as a form of success in drama. And we've done ourselves a disfavor in our education system by quantifying creativity in English, in poetry, in literature, in drama, and in art. A lot of the things that put people off those subjects, in a sense, is because they themselves have to conform to assessment objective 1, assessment objective 2, when they're really quite organic and creative and difficult to pin down. And that's the nature of it. You know, only when you're coming up to your exams will you try and think in terms of, you know, is this accessible? Is this an accessible action? Well, so I'd like to free up those subjects in schools as well and see them valued more.
I completely agree. I remember being at school years ago, decades ago, and we had an ex-HMI inspector come in and talk about how we could show progress. And I was like, well, if I give that kid feedback, they're going to draw back in their drawing. They're not going to be able to see what they did originally. You're only going to see how they've improved. And it was like, oh, we should take a picture of it was before the feedback and then stick it in next to it, and then you can show it. And I was like, no, I just want them to draw. Like that's going to be so much time to be able to do that for the whole entire cohort. And same with, like, prior to COVID, there was a big thing on culture capital. That was the buzzword that was coming around, and how schools are kind of facilitating these conversations to fill the gap of the kids that don't go to theatre, that don't go to operas, that don't discuss the news around the dinner table. And I feel like that was such an important positive thing that kind of then disappeared with COVID, and that everything happened. And now even more so with these kids with social anxiety that haven't been out, that haven't experienced those things. But also the positives of COVID is the fact that a lot of it is online. Like, we can watch shows online, we can watch theatres, things online, and that actually we need to kind of reinvigorate that love for the arts, as it's really important. So I think it's an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see how that changes potentially over the next few years. But thank you all for your opinions on that one. And now on to our lovely little third story. So our third story, we like to throw in a lovely, happy one occasionally. So this one is about pupils and dementia patients bonding over childhood memories. So they discuss it that dementia is like a bookcase. The newest memory would always be on top, and then sometimes memories fall out of the bottom. So there's pupils from Riverdale Primary School have been visiting people with dementia and discussing and talking different stories with them. I just think it's such a lovely story, and I think it's one of those that we need to make sure that we get those in. And I just think it's such a lovely kind of thing, and it's one of those, as talking and stories is just so important, and we need to make sure we're including those. And on that note, just talking about kind of stories and kind of literature, don't forget that our lovely sponsors, so our show is sponsored by John Catt Educational, so they are back sponsoring us, which is great. So you can get all your professional development needs from them, and they have great resources that support teaching around the world. And you can visit their site at johncattbookshop.com and explore their full range of titles. And we've got our lovely code as well, so if you use the code JCTTR2425, you can get 20% off there. So happy reading. But also, we're also sponsored by Reading Solutions UK, who are the best practice and innovative strategies to foster confident lifelong readers. So join the free online international reading conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. You can hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basiq Siddiq, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, and Natural Literacy Trust Irene Piction. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of current educational landscapes, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. So you can visit their website at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk to get your free ticket. And that's one of the things that I love. I know I have a care home at the back of mine, and my son can go over there and read to them, because my son has a speech delay, so struggles with reading, but they've got the patience and the time to kind of listen to him. And I think that's one of these lovely little things that we probably don't do enough of, that should be encouraged. And I just think it's this lovely story that I would love to hear far more about, that the kind of thing. This is the kind of volunteering I wouldn't mind seeing kind of happening in the curriculum. What's your thoughts on it, Nathan?
Yeah, it's lovely. You know, I strangely enough, I was at a care home seeing my grandmother, my kid's great grandmother, with my 2 boys over the weekend, and she loved it and they loved it. And okay, so some of the time she didn't know if they were her grandkids or her kids, or the enjoyment of interacting with people of a different age and playing in a different way is so nice to see, and so important for our young people. I have previously taken groups of teenagers to help in care homes, in their own way, just getting cups of tea for people or reading to them, as you say. But to do this stuff, there needs to be curriculum time, and there needs to be money and staff time. And that's where, as you say, this national service, cut it, Rishi. Forget it. Buy every school a minibus and give us a half-hour afternoon where we can take a group of 12 kids to the care home and make real community schools. Now, I went to a primary school as a kid that was called a community school. And this is what I want for my young people, my children, for young people, to be in a community school. That's the power of a primary school, to be part of the community. And to do things like this and to get the experience and to share. So I think it's a really powerful thing. I think all schools have the opportunity to do it. Maybe not the funds, maybe not the staff time or the curriculum pressures. And those are things that actually can come from above, and the government can look at and say, do you know what? We want more people connected in society. We want more volunteering. Well, that's how you do it. That's how you find it.
And it is that thing, isn't it, that the kids will get so much out of it. They won't really forget it, but it's more that the people that they're visiting will get so much out of it, because a lot of them, we are all busy. If we're working full time, being able to get there and visit them, they might only have visitors once a week or once a month, and actually having the children go visit them, it's this other positive thing that will help break up their day and it be this positive experience. John, what's your opinion on it?
It's a lovely story, as you rightly say. It's a delight to think about that. And my father was in World War II. My grandfather was in World War I, and I remember when I was at school, the commemorative days marches would be full of, here come the veterans from World War II, here come the veterans from World War I. They're all disappearing. They're gone now, really. And those people, you think, so well, I wish I'd asked him more. I wish I'd talked to them more about the past. It's gone. It's disappearing. And I remember I had a job, semi-volunteering. It was working for a part-time job, working for a care home in North London. And my job that day was I used to go in there and they say, right, John, your job today is stick with this guy. He's 100 and something years old, and he falls over a lot. So you basically stop him falling over. So every time he got up, he wouldn't use a walking frame. I'd stop him, try to catch him when he fell over. And he'd been in World War I, and he told me all about his injuries in World War I, his survival, Battle of the Somme, and all sorts of things like that. And I've stuck with me ever since. The other encouraging thing about this story is that obviously there's a nicer caliber of old people these days, because what I remember when I was a kid was all my grandmother's generation hated children. They were a sour lot, and we were always being told to shut up and be quiet and sit still, and being told why was I whining. So clearly, older people nicer. I'm glad to hear that. I'll try and be old and nice. Nice.
My grandma suffered from dementia, and she was very, very prim and proper, and was very you don't show emotion, you just kind of get on with it, you hard graft. And I remember when she got dementia and going and visiting her, and suddenly she started telling me all these stories about the war and when she was younger. And it turned out actually she was engaged to another man before my granddad and broke up with him via letter in the war to run away with my granddad. And how during the war she was one of 11, and they would drive around when the boys went, they drove around on all the tractors and ran the farm themselves. And but she never let me know that when she was healthy. And it was just it was kind of, I found out all these other little things. So there are different sides to dementia, and it can be that they like you say, they might not remember them from week to week, but it's also one of those that it's quite important, I think, that children understand about this disease, because it does affect quite a lot of people, and kind of understanding the effects, but learning that patience and that curiosity and just having that comfort and helping them with that situation. Maxine, what's your thought on this lovely little story?
Yeah, it's such a good story on so many levels, and between you alluded to quite a few of them. So, absolutely congratulations to the head teacher and the staff at Riverdale Primary School for not just doing this, but also making sure that it has ended up in the media where we've seen it and it's caught our eye. Totally to echo Nathan's shout for give us the curriculum time and the resources to do this, because learning firsthand from people about their experiences is such a great way to learn. John, you described how you'd remembered your learning about the war, remembering about these playground games, hearing them firsthand. And let's be honest, the 90s are in the national curriculum now, aren't they? So, actually talking to all of us is positive. You've also mentioned as well that the difficulties around dementia and around Alzheimer's, and we can be scared of what we don't know. And there can be then fear among children and young adults, and older people can become quite scary if you are frightened of this. So for children to learn early on, that would have really helped me as a child. If I'd known and I'd experienced people with dementia and with Alzheimer's, when that then actually starts to happen to people in my family, like my dad now, and I'd learned earlier, that would be really beneficial. And I think it just helps everybody. And of course, the old people are loving it too. So, no, so great. So congratulations to Riverdale Primary School. Thank you.
I think it's exactly that. It's a lovely thing. And my school does something very unusual. They actually have a Wednesday morning, which is an hour and a half, where the kids pick an enrichment activity. So I've been doing community art. So we've been creating art for part of this art trail within the local community. But actually, that gives the perfect spot for kids that want to volunteer to go and volunteer. And I feel like there should be more of that within kind of the space within schools. And we need to share good practice of that. And those bits are just as important as the lessons sometimes, and actually they're the bits that the students might take away and kind of remember, or maybe go into care. We know that there's a shortage of care workers, and maybe actually it's going to be the thing that makes them want to go and do that and enjoy it, and also help the people in care, see those lovely things, helping both of them and seeing it all kind of come together. So just we like a good news story as well as the the negative things that happen in education. We've got to remember the positives as well. And talking of some positive education, here we're going to move on to our weekly review. Right, who's your go? Maxine, who's your show of the week?
Christopher's show. Who wants to be a teacher anyway? He talked to Dr. Emily McLeod, and it was really research based and challenged some of the ideas around the narrative of teaching being a vocation. Dug a little bit deeper. Really top quality show.
And Nathan, who have you gone for?
Mine was Maxine's show this week. It was about kind of the journey into headship, new to headship. Really interesting. I think something that Teachers Talk Radio does really well, just finding interesting people and them telling their story and what they've learned, and just these nuggets of wisdom. Not someone famous, not someone writing a book, just an interesting person with some really valid points that really interesting to listen to.
I think it is one of those as well. That headship can be quite lonely. I keep sending them to, I've got a new head, so I keep sending them to him to listen. What about you, John? Who's your this week?
Well, I'll go for Dave Brown's late show on Friday, which he talked about religious education. And the strength of this show was the guest. Well, Dave, who's a great, good interview as well, but the guests, particularly a guy called Ed Pawson, who seemed to really know this subject inside out and was able to explore it, the way it's become a kind of Cinderella subject. Yet people think it's really, really important, yet it's beset with all sorts of social attitudes and values and political interference. And RE is a subject that is really, it could be so much more than it is in some senses. And that really came through in the show. It's a great show.
Yeah, I listened to that one. His guests were very knowledgeable. It was a really interesting. I didn't realize how different it was taught around the country as well. So yeah, it was really interesting to have a listen back to. I'm picking Darren's one, which was looking at colour theory and marking, the Saturday Breakfast Show. So he looked at how Aristotle uncolour as the foundation of colour theory and how our process of colour impacts pens we use for marking. Now, I am slightly, as an art teacher, obsessed with colour theory. So this was right up my street. And I even did a module at university on the effects of colour and putting different colours on top of each other and removing colour. So yeah, I found this quite interesting. It's little things, the psychology of colour is tiny little things that we don't really think about, but it's just a fun, interesting show to listen to. So that's our weekly review. Don't forget you can follow us over on Twitter at TTR Radio Official or at LinkedIn at Teacher Talk Radio. So go find us and follow us on, and we'll be back next week with 3 more news stories. Thank you for watching.